Have you ever left a conversation feeling completely fine, and then, 10 minutes later, your brain starts replaying everything you said? Wait. Why did I say that? Did that sound weird? Maybe I talked too much. Why did I make that joke? What did they mean when they looked at me like that? And suddenly, a conversation that lasted 5 minutes turns into an investigation that lasts 3 hours. You replay the words. You analyze their facial expression. You remember the exact moment when your voice sounded slightly different. You imagine what they might think about you now. And the strangest part is that you cannot go back and change anything. The conversation is over. The words are gone. But your mind is still sitting there, reviewing the evidence. If you do this, you are not necessarily overreacting, overly sensitive, or socially awkward. In fact, there is a deeper reason why the human mind can become obsessed with things that have already happened, especially conversations. And once you understand what your brain is actually trying to do, something important becomes clear. You are usually not overthinking the words themselves. You are overthinking what those words might mean about you. Think about that for a second. Imagine you tell someone a story and they suddenly become quiet. The conversation ends, and later that night your mind starts asking questions. Did I offend them? Did I say something stupid? Maybe they thought I was arrogant. Maybe they don't like me. But notice what happened. You don't actually know what they were thinking. Their silence could have meant 100 different things. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they were thinking about something completely unrelated. But your brain doesn't like empty spaces. When information is missing, the mind often tries to fill in the blanks. And when you are already worried about being judged, rejected, misunderstood, or disliked, the explanation your brain chooses is often the one that makes you feel the worst. This is one of the hidden traps of overthinking. Your mind starts with uncertainty. Then it searches for an explanation. Then it mistakes that explanation for reality. And before you know it, you are emotionally reacting to something that may exist only inside your imagination. You might think, I know I'm probably overthinking this. But knowing that doesn't always stop it. Because overthinking is not usually about logic. It is often about protection. Your brain is trying to prevent something uncomfortable from happening again. At some point, your mind learned that social situations can be risky. Maybe you were embarrassed before. Maybe someone criticized you. Maybe you grew up feeling like you had to be careful about what you said. Maybe you experienced rejection. Or maybe you simply care deeply about how other people see you. So after a conversation ends, your brain goes back and reviews everything. Almost like a security system checking the footage. Did we make a mistake? Did we say something dangerous? Did we give someone a reason to reject us? Did we embarrass ourselves? The problem is that your brain does not always know when to stop reviewing. What begins as reflection can slowly become rumination. Reflection asks, what can I learn from this? Rumination asks, what if I ruined everything? Reflection eventually reaches a conclusion. Rumination keeps opening the same file over and over again. And here is something fascinating. The more you replay a conversation, the less objective you may become. Because you are no longer remembering the actual conversation. You are remembering your latest interpretation of it. Each time you replay the moment, you might add more emotion to it. Maybe at first you simply thought, that joke was a little awkward. An hour later, it becomes, that joke probably sounded stupid. The next day, it becomes, they definitely think I'm weird. Nothing about the original conversation changed. Only your interpretation changed. But emotionally, it can feel like new evidence. This is why overthinking can be so convincing. You are not just imagining possibilities. You are repeatedly strengthening them. And the more attention you give a thought, the more important your brain assumes it must be. If you think about a conversation once, your brain might treat it as a normal memory. If you think about it 50 times, your brain may start thinking, this must be important. Why else would we keep coming back to it? So the thought becomes even more difficult to ignore. It's a strange loop. You think about something because it feels important. And it feels more important because you keep thinking about it. But there is another reason people overthink things they already said. They often have an impossible standard for social interactions. They expect themselves to say exactly the right thing. To sound intelligent but not arrogant. Funny but not annoying. Confident but not intimidating. Honest but not too honest. Friendly but not desperate. Interesting but not self-centered. And somehow, they expect to do all of this in real time. During an unpredictable conversation. With another human being whose thoughts they cannot read. No wonder the mind feels exhausted afterward. Imagine watching a recording of someone else's conversation. Would you analyze every sentence they said? Would you notice that they repeated a word? Would you remember a moment when they paused for 2 seconds? Probably not. But when the conversation is your own, suddenly every tiny detail feels magnified. This happens because you are experiencing the conversation from the inside. You know what you meant to say. You know what you were worried about. You know every moment when you felt uncertain. The other person doesn't have access to all of that. They experienced you. You experienced yourself and every insecurity you brought into the conversation. Those are two very different things. And this leads to an uncomfortable but freeing realization. Most people are not analyzing you as much as you think they are. They are busy analyzing themselves. While you're lying in bed wondering whether you sounded strange, they may be lying in their own bed wondering whether they sounded strange. You might be thinking, I can't believe I said that. And they might be thinking, I hope I didn't talk too much. Human beings are surprisingly self-focused, especially when it comes to social anxiety and insecurity. We often imagine that we are standing under a spotlight. But in reality, everyone else is standing under their own. That doesn't mean people never judge us. Of course they do sometimes. We all form opinions. We all misunderstand people occasionally. We all say things we later wish we had said differently. But overthinking usually takes a small possibility and treats it like a confirmed disaster. You said something slightly awkward. Your brain says, everyone noticed. You made a mistake. Your brain says, now they know who you really are. Someone didn't respond enthusiastically. Your brain says, they're upset with you. This is where it helps to ask a very simple question. What do I actually know? Not what do I fear? Not what can I imagine? What do I actually know? Maybe what you know is simply this. I had a conversation. I said something. The other person went quiet. That's it. Everything else may be interpretation. And sometimes that distinction can create a little space between you and the story your mind is telling. Another reason overthinking becomes so intense is because the past feels controllable when the future feels uncertain. You can't change what you said. But your brain acts as if analyzing it one more time might somehow prepare you for the consequences. Maybe if I figure out exactly what I did wrong, I can prevent something bad from happening. So you keep thinking. You keep reviewing. You keep searching for certainty. But there is no final answer because the question itself cannot be fully answered. What exactly does that person think about me right now? You don't know. And your mind hates that. This is why overthinking is often a search for certainty in a situation where certainty is impossible. And the harder you search, the more possibilities you find. Maybe they liked what I said. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they misunderstood me. Maybe they forgot about it immediately. Maybe they are thinking about it right now. Your mind can create an unlimited number of possibilities. And if your goal is to think until you find absolute certainty, you may be thinking forever. Sometimes the healthier question is not, how can I know exactly what they think? It's, can I tolerate not knowing? That sounds simple. But emotionally, it can be a powerful shift. Because freedom from overthinking doesn't always come from finding the perfect answer. Sometimes it comes from realizing you don't need one. You can say, maybe that conversation was awkward. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they misunderstood me. Maybe they didn't. But I am not going to spend the next 6 hours trying to solve something I cannot actually verify. That doesn't mean becoming careless. It doesn't mean refusing to learn from your mistakes. If you genuinely hurt someone, made a mistake, or said something you regret, you can take responsibility. You can apologize. You can clarify what you meant. You can learn from it. Then something important has to happen. You have to let the moment be finished. Because there is a difference between taking responsibility and punishing yourself. Overthinkers often confuse the two. They think, if I stop worrying about this, it means I don't care. But that isn't true. You can care without obsessing. You can learn without attacking yourself. You can acknowledge a mistake without turning it into your identity. One awkward sentence does not define you. One strange conversation does not reveal your entire personality. One person misunderstanding you does not mean you are fundamentally misunderstood. And perhaps this is the deeper issue underneath all of it. Sometimes we overthink what we said because we believe every interaction is a test. A test of whether we are likable. A test of whether we are intelligent. A test of whether we belong. A test of whether people will accept us. So every conversation feels like a performance. And when the performance ends, the review begins. But what if conversations were not tests? What if you were allowed to be imperfect in front of other people? What if you were allowed to pause? To say something awkward? To change your mind? To explain yourself badly sometimes? To have a joke not land? To forget a word? To be human? Most people say imperfect things every day. They just don't always spend the next several hours punishing themselves for it. And maybe that is the real skill to develop. Not becoming the person who never says anything awkward. That is impossible. The goal is becoming someone who can survive the discomfort of being imperfect. Because once you accept that you will occasionally say the wrong thing, your mind no longer has to treat every conversation like a potential emergency. You can begin to trust yourself. Not because you will always perform perfectly. But because even when you don't, you can handle it. The next time you catch yourself replaying something you said, try noticing what your mind is actually asking. Is it asking, did I make a mistake? Or is it secretly asking, am I still acceptable after making a mistake? Those are very different questions. And sometimes the answer you need is not hidden inside the conversation at all. Sometimes the answer is something you have to give yourself. Yes. You are still acceptable. Even if your voice sounded nervous. Even if you talked too much. Even if you said something you wish you had said differently. Even if someone misunderstood you. You do not have to earn the right to exist comfortably around other people by performing perfectly in every conversation. And maybe that's the thought worth remembering the next time your brain starts replaying the past. The conversation is over. The words have already been spoken. You cannot control how every person interprets them. But you can decide whether you are going to spend the rest of the night trapped inside a conversation that no longer exists. Maybe the real peace does not come from finally proving that you said everything perfectly. Maybe it comes from realizing that you don't need to. If this helped you understand your mind better, subscribe for more videos like this.